Our reading this morning is from 1 Samuel 14:48. 1 Samuel 14:48, 47, excuse me. And we will read all the way through chapter 15 to verse 35. Hear the word of the Lord. Now when Saul had taken the kingdom over Israel, he fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab, the sons of Ammon, Edom, the kings of Zobah, and the Philistines, and wherever he turned, he inflicted punishment. He acted valiantly and defeated the Amalekites, who delivered Israel from the hands of those who plundered them, Now the sons of Saul were Jonathan and Ishvi and Malchishua, and the names of his two daughters were these: the name of the firstborn Merab, and the name of the younger Michal. The name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz. And the name of the captain of his army was Abner, the son of Ner, Saul's uncle. Kish was the father of Saul, and Ner, the father of Abner, was the son of Abiel. Now the war against the Philistines was severe all the days of Saul. And when Saul saw any mighty man or any valiant man, he attached him to his staff. Then Samuel said to Saul, "The Lord sent me to anoint you as king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore listen to the words of the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish Amalek for what he did to Israel, how he set himself against him on the way while he was coming up from Egypt. Now go and strike Amalek and utterly destroy all that he has, and do not spare him, but put to death both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey." Then Saul summoned the people and numbered them in Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 men of Judah. Saul came to the city of Amalek and set an ambush in the valley. Saul said to the Kenites, "Go, depart, go down from among the Amalekites, so that I do not destroy you with them, for you showed kindness to all the sons of Israel when they came up from Egypt." So the Kenites departed from among the Amalekites. So Saul defeated the Amalekites from Havilah as you go to Shur, which is east of Egypt. He captured Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep, the oxen, the fatlings, the lambs, and all that was good, and were not willing to destroy them utterly. But everything despised and worthless, that they utterly destroyed. Then the word of the Lord came to Samuel, saying, "I regret that I have made Saul king, for he has turned back from following me, and has not carried out my commands." And Samuel was distressed and cried out to the Lord all night. Samuel rose early in the morning to meet Saul. And it was told Samuel, saying, "Saul came to Carmel, and behold, he set up a monument for himself, then turned and proceeded on down to Gilgal." Samuel came to Saul, and Saul said to him, "Blessed are you of the Lord. I have carried out the command of the Lord." But Samuel said, "What then is this bleating of the sheep in my ears, and the lowing of the oxen which I hear?" Saul said, "They have brought them from the Amalekites. For the people spared the best of the sheep and oxen to sacrifice to the Lord your God, but the rest we have utterly destroyed." Then Samuel said to Saul, "Wait, and let me tell you what the Lord said to me last night." And he said to him, "Speak." Samuel said, "Is it not true, though you were little in your own eyes, you were made the head of the tribes of Israel? And the Lord anointed you king over Israel. And the Lord sent you on a mission and said, 'Go and utterly destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are exterminated.' Why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord, but rushed upon the spoil and did what was evil in the sight of the Lord?" Then Saul said to Samuel, "I did obey the voice of the Lord and went on the mission on which the Lord sent me, and have brought back Agag, the king of Amalek, and have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took some of the spoil, sheep and oxen, the choicest of the things devoted to destruction, to sacrifice to the Lord your God at Gilgal. Samuel said, "Has the Lord as much delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of divination, and insubordination is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king." Then Saul said to Samuel, "I have sinned. I have indeed transgressed the command of the Lord in your words, because I feared the people and listened to their voice. Now therefore, please pardon my sin and return with me, that I may worship the Lord." But Samuel said to Saul, "I will not return with you, for you have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you from being king over Israel." As Samuel turned to go, Saul seized the edge of his robe, and it tore. So Samuel said to him, "The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today, and has given it to your neighbor, who is better than you. Also, the glory of Israel will not lie or change his mind, for he is not a man that he should change his mind." Then he said, "I have sinned, but please honor me now before the elders of my people and before Israel, and go back with me, that I may worship the Lord your God." So Samuel went back following Saul, and Saul worshiped the Lord. Then Samuel said, "Bring me Agag, the king of the Amalekites." And Agag came to him cheerfully. And Agag said, "Surely the bitterness of death is past." But Samuel said, "As your sword has made women childless, so shall your mother be childless among women." And Samuel hewed Agag to pieces before the Lord at Gilgal. Then Samuel went to Ramah, but Saul went up to his house at Gibeah of Saul. Samuel did not see Saul again until the day of his death, for Samuel grieved over Saul. And the Lord regretted that he had made Saul king over Israel. We live in a strange time in human history. Well, I say strange. The odd truth about human history is all times are strange. What stands out in particular about this moment of history is we live in an era that hates consequences. All consequences. I remember when I was a kid, people had an attitude, I don't like bad consequences, but I love good consequences. If I work hard, I want a reward. But if I do badly, well, is not forgiveness divine and to err human? Can't I avoid the bad consequence? If I'm speeding, can't you let me off with a warning, officer? But if I do good, well, I want my bonus. I want my paycheck. Now, people are reaching the point of they don't want any consequences. They don't want to be punished, and they don't want to have to work for anything that's good. Things should just happen out of nowhere, without cause and without warning, and they better be good things. They don't want bad things. But heaven forbid they should be consequences, because that implies work and just retribution for what you've done wrong. But the truth of the matter is you can't avoid consequences. You just can't. If you eat and don't work out, you're going to gain weight. If you hold a hammer above your foot and drop it, you're going to break your foot. By the way, please don't experiment with that. Just take my word for it. If you speed and a policeman sees you, you're going to get a ticket. That's just the way the world works. This passage talks about consequences, specifically the very consequences that our society hates the most, the consequences of sin. The consequences of sin. I know sin is a 4-letter word in today's society, but it's something we have to take seriously and we have to talk about, because sin does have consequences. The first consequence of sin is that it breaks our relationship with God. The first consequence of sin is that it breaks our relationship with God. God is perfectly holy. God is perfectly pure. God He's not just the standard, or He's not just meeting the standard of perfection. He is the standard of perfection. He is the unwavering, unchanging, absolute, which is good and pure throughout. He is goodness. He is purity. He is righteousness. We measure everything else against him to see how it measures up. And as the scriptures tell us, his eyes are too pure to look upon evil. He cannot have before him anything which is impure, which is corrupted, which is polluted. I mean, you don't like those things, do you? You don't like to have corrupted, polluted things. Why do you think you have a washing machine? When your clothes get a stain on them, does that make the clothes any less clothesy? Can you not wear a shirt that has a little grape juice spot on it? Of course you can. Will it keep you warm and dry? Of course it will. Are you still going to wear it if you can't get that spot out? No, you aren't. Because it doesn't meet your standard. God has created us, and he holds us to a perfect standard. Look what happens to Saul in this passage. Saul has sinned against the Lord, and we notice a turn as he's trying to make an excuse. They have brought them from the Amalekites, and for the people spared the best of the sheep and oxen to sacrifice to the Lord your God. Not to the Lord God. Not to the Lord my God, but speaking to the prophet Samuel, to the Lord your God. Even as he tries to make his excuse, Saul is forced to acknowledge there has been a change in his relationship with God. He is no longer Saul's God. He's everyone else's God. No longer does Saul enjoy the special favor of God which put him in the position of kingship. Now he experiences God's rejection. And what makes it worse when he asks for the Lord's pardon? Please, pardon me, Samuel. Give me the Lord's forgiveness. What does God say to him? No. You have rejected my word. When we sin, our relationship with God suffers. And indeed, we are born into this world without a relationship with God. Well, we have a relationship, it's just a very bad one. We relate to him as criminal to judge, as convict to executioner, as debtor to creditor. That one may hit us a little bit harder at home. We stand before him already guilty because each one of us is born in sin. Our very nature cries out against God that we will do that which is just or that which is unjust. We will follow our own way against him. When I taught Bible, one of the questions my students like to hit me with was, how can a baby, even an unborn child, be guilty of sin? They haven't done anything wrong. And I had to point out, no, they haven't, but if they could, they would. They're not guilty of having committed sins, they're guilty of being a sinner. Because that's what their nature is. And even they need the grace of Jesus Christ. That's why we start teaching children the gospel from the very beginning. We don't wait. When you remember that your sin is a rejection of God, that your sin is a rejection of your relationship with God, when you remember that you are basically saying when you sin to God, I don't want you, that will help you avoid sin. When you recognize the severity of what sin is and what it has done, it'll help you turn your back on it. Because ultimately, the choice is not to do right or to do wrong. It is to follow God or to walk away from God in that moment. That is a great encouragement. That's the first consequence of sin. The second consequence flows from it. Sin takes away our relationship with God, and having lost our relationship with God, we lose the blessings of God. We lose the blessings of God. You see, every blessing that you and I enjoy from the Lord is part of our relationship with Him. Now, He does give some general blessings. We call these common grace. The sun shines on all, the rain falls on all. But the special blessings that you and I enjoy are part of the covenant relationship we have with God. Saul had enjoyed covenant blessings. Look at him. He had a family. He had daughters and sons. He had a relative in charge of the army. To all appearances, he was establishing himself as king, solidifying power in the royal family. The monarchy is growing, it's developing. He's conquering the Lord's enemies. He's fighting the battles. And most importantly, he's the king. He has the anointing of God to make him king. But he threw it away. He broke the word of the Lord, and having broken the Lord's word, he was no longer in a right covenant relationship with God. And not being under a right covenant relationship with God, he can no longer enjoy the blessings of God, and God declares to him, I have taken the kingdom away from you. He'd already done this once before for the same reason. He broke the Lord's word. Now he says it again. He emphasizes to him, you cannot get this right, Saul. You keep doing this, Saul. You are not the king. You will have no dynasty. Have as many sons and daughters as you want. They will not sit on the throne. Consolidate power all that you want. It will not be yours. I have taken it away from you. All the blessings gone. Our blessings are a little bit different. It's true the Lord does bless us materially, but let's face it, that's not the stuff that matters. Because at the end of the day, you have to leave all that behind. The saying is true, you can't take it with you. But we have the blessings of peace, the blessing of comfort. The blessing, honestly, the blessing that gets me is being able to look at the world and the world makes sense. The rest of the world is caught up in chasing questions. Oh, we want to understand the questions, the mystery. And I look at the Bible and go, look, folks, I like a good mystery as much as anybody, but things are not as mysterious as you seem to want to make them. I like looking at a tree and going, there's a tree. Why is it a tree? Not because there was some cosmic accident and a big bang and a bunch of stuff jumbled together. God made that a tree. That's why it has tree DNA. And it grows like a tree. I have people DNA. I grow like a people. That's how that works. The sun is in the universe. We go around it. The world just makes sense. And there's justice. And there's righteousness. And I know why. That's a blessing. Why is the world running around, unable to make sense of itself? Because they have lost these precious blessings. Why do they turn to empty things to support themselves, things that cannot last? Because they have lost the blessing of peace. Why do they run around entertaining themselves to death? Because they have lost the blessing of joy. Not having that relationship with God, they've lost the wonderful blessings of God. When we remember that God has given us these wonderful blessings, we lose the motivation to sin. Because every temptation is a bargain. A declaration that if you go against God's will, you'll get something good. When you start weighing what the temptation offers versus what you'll lose, what you're giving up from the hand of the Lord, you realize it's not a good bargain. It's not worth doing. But again, our problem is simply this: we are already sinners by nature. We have already committed sins against God. We have already turned away from Him. So what is it we're supposed to do? How can we have an answer to sin when we already find ourselves in the position of Saul? Why is it we are not here today mourning and weeping that we are lost in sin forever? The consequences of our sin require the intervention of God. The consequences of our sin require the intervention of God. And thankfully, God has intervened. It was too late for Saul, but God did send Samuel. What did He send Samuel to do? Just to yell at Saul and tell him he shouldn't have done these things? Just to tell him, hey, I can hear the cattle over there telling me that you didn't obey? By the way, I have to point this out. There's actually a joke in this passage that you won't get unless you speak Hebrew. It says, the lowing of cattle which I hear. That is the word in Hebrew. It's low. That's where they didn't think cattle said moo. They went low, low. Low is a Hebrew word. Do you know what it means? No. So here Saul is saying, I have obeyed the Lord, and all this herd of cattle, no, no. And Samuel says, what's this knowing of cattle that I hear? Or lowing, but it's hilarious. God has a sense of humor. It's all over the Bible. You just got to know a little Hebrew to get it. We're in trouble. But Samuel didn't go there just to say even the cattle say no. At the end of the story, there's this one scene that jumps because we don't expect it. Agag, who has been spared, the king of the Amalekites, is brought before Samuel. He's expecting mercy, and Samuel picks up a sword and hacks him to pieces himself. That sounds gory, but you have to understand, this is a man who was king of a people who were dedicated to the opposition of God's people, Israel. This is an enemy of God and His people. If he is allowed to survive, he will continue to be an enemy of God and His people. Don't believe me? Apparently one of his kids might have gotten away, because later in the book of Esther, the great enemy of the Hebrew people who tried to have all the Jews exterminated is Haman the Agagite, son of Agag. This is a bad dude. God knew what He was doing. He was saying, I am going to deliver my people. And so He sends Samuel, and Samuel kills this enemy by the will of the Lord. And he also makes another declaration. He not only tells Saul, the kingdom has been taken away from you, he adds one little line, and God has given it to your neighbor who is better than you. God's people need a deliverer. God's people need a redeemer who is not a sinner, who will not throw away his relationship with God, who will not lose the blessings of God, but who will obey God and so solidify his relationship with God forever, and will inherit the blessings of God for all of eternity, and who can then turn to us and say, I have done all for you. I have done all this on your behalf so that you, in me, can have all the blessings and have an eternal, established relationship with God. That is why God personally intervened. And the second person of the Trinity, God the Son, Jesus, came down from heaven and was made man and lived and died for you, so that you can have life and a relationship with God and eternal blessing. This is the news we need as sinners. Day by day, even those who have already experienced salvation, we need to be reminded you stand in God's favor, not because of you, because you mess up every day. You stand in God's favor because of Jesus Christ. And this is the message we need to carry to the world, because they don't understand what's going on. If you are opening up your paper or your internet browser, if you're more 21st century, and you are thinking to yourself, the world has lost its mind, it has. In fact, the news is even worse. It never had its mind to begin with. They need to hear that there is a relationship with God and the blessings of peace, of salvation, of being made holy in a relationship with Jesus Christ. So settle yourself on Christ and carry this good news to the world, that the consequences of sin may be wiped away and this world find renewal. Let's go to the Lord our God in prayer.